Very good. I think the webinar is now streaming live. So I have the pleasure to welcome everybody in this session number 10 of the Transport Innovation Summit. Pleasure to be with you online, and also pleasure to be your moderator for this session on behalf of the UITP, so the International Association of Public Transport, based in Brussels. My name is Arno Kerkhoff. I'm responsible for the bus division in UITP, and special thank you to Luke, with whom we collaborate together from the Transport Innovation Summit and UITP to achieve the let's say the promotion of the public transport across also the virtual scenery. So it's really a pleasure to have the opportunity to be with so many friends, colleagues, and also well-known members today. We have designed a panel session around the topic of technology for the decarbonization of transport and sustainable mobility. So it will be a rather technology-focused session, but I'm quite sure also with many related aspects of policy, regulation, and operations. So we will see where we will end up in the question and answer session after the speakers. We have a very fascinating high-level setup of the panel today. Actually, with also quite some different stakeholders. We are having a private operator, private public transport operator. We have a municipal, or let's say city operator, and also a city stakeholder from the city, actually of Stockholm. For the operator, we have the private group Arriva with Liz Benison. Pleasure to have you also on the panel. Sture Portvik, from Oslo, Oslo City, and Joe Ma from the Shenzhen Bus Group in China. Joe, I hope it's still acceptable time slot for you, not too late. I know that's
artificial lights on.
Yes, it looks beautiful. And now we have to cope with the time zones in this digital streaming. So welcome to everybody. So I'm really looking forward to listening to your presentation from your respective organization, for which we have around 15 minutes in the planning. So I would propose we run sequentially through your three contributions during the session, and then we keep 20 minutes, 30 minutes slot for discussion amongst the panelists, but also with an interaction with the audience being online. Very good. I think it's probably time to maybe start with the first contribution. Actually, this will be Sture Portvik. So Sture, also very welcome again. Sture Portvik, you are actually manager electromobility for the Agency of Urban Environment, which I understood is an agency belonging to the city of Oslo in Norway. And you will kick off the show with a presentation about electrification of transport, and with the subtitle Policy Learnings from the World's First Mass Market for EVs. So I think this is a hint that we are speaking here about Norway. Please, Sture, I would say start your presentation, and the screen is yours.
Thank you. You can all see the screen now. Good. My name is Sture. Thank you, Arno. I'm talking a little bit about my favorite subject, which is electrification, of course, and what we are doing in Oslo. The focus, the starting point is that we want to actually reduce emissions. So the climate goals are pretty heavy. We want to reduce the CO2 emission with 95% within 2030. So we have to do something about transport because transport constitutes more than half of all emission created in Oslo. Okay, so what did we do? We started early together with other front runners like Amsterdam, and we tried to promote the development of EVs. And it's really not rocket science. You have to make sure if you want people to choose an EV, that an EV is cheap to buy, cheap to use, free parking, free electricity, and so on, free passing in the toll gates in and out of the city, and also convenient. And convenient means, for instance, parking, but also charging. But in addition, most incentives were actually in place in the 90s, but nothing did happen before you got the right product. So the right product you can see down below, it's, of course, you need nice cars. So it really took off when the Nissan Leaf came on the market in 2011. Then again, with the Tesla S model to the right there, I was so lucky to have a ride from my American friends, but yeah, you need the right product. Next slide shows the situation at the moment. Last month, 76% of all new cars sold in Oslo were actually electric, either a plug-in hybrid or a pure battery electric. And down to the left, you can see the most popular models at this time, regardless of driveline. So number one is Audi e-tron, then you have Kia Niro, you have Tesla 3, and of course the new ID. So 3 out of 4 cars are electric, and this shows that green taxes are actually working, but you have to make it affordable for common people to buy an EV. Sometimes you get, yeah, it's good that things are working, but of course also it's a problem because you can see to the right, it's from the newspaper saying opptatt, which means occupied, occupied, occupied. And the newspaper focused on the difficulties finding a free spot to charge your vehicle.
Okay. Sorry, just I heard you speaking about difficulties, but just a technical intervention. We hear you, but the sound is quite scattered.
Okay, sorry about that. Is that better?
I think it's better now. Yeah, it sounded like something was disconnected, or maybe.
Maybe some technical issues there. Sorry about that.
It sounds better now. Yes, please, please go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, maybe I turn down the volume a little, a couple of here, and yeah, and 76% is pretty high, but you can see in this diagram, if you compare to other countries, yeah, the scale goes up to 8%, but we are actually on the 47, but that's on national level. In the city, it's 10% higher. Okay, is this all well? Boosting EV sales? Yes, of course, but of course it's not only a blessing. There are some troubles. You can see the bus lane to the left, and the question is, okay, it's a bus lane, but where is the bus? Well, you can see a bus if you look carefully, but the rest is actually EVs, because as an EV driver, you are allowed to use the bus lane. And that was a very strong incentive because you save like 30 minutes each way to work in the morning. But of course, it became too congested. So now you have to be 2 persons in a car. And down to the right, it was this new law saying that you can drive an EV in the bus lane, but then you have to be at least 2 persons. And this creative guy, he actually bought an inflatable doll, and he was stopped by the police the first day. And I don't think he do that anymore because I guess it was a little bit expensive. Okay, what is our percent of the people living in the city actually doesn't have their own parking, so that's a challenge. And And the other thing is that, of course, we have to focus on user friendliness, make it as easy as possible. And also you need a fair price. So yeah, also cost-efficient solutions. Next one just shows some examples. Today we have 200 normal chargers, AC chargers scattered around in the city, and also, of course, quick charging stations. Both are important. I'm not going into details here, but quick charging is important. Down to the left is our vice mayor opening a mobility hub. And also, of course, it's very important to make sure that people can charge at home. And especially people living in multifamily buildings, it can be a little bit challenging. So down to the right is a picture of a typical board in a housing association. For the first time, they are studying an charging point. What do we do? So we have to help them. And the last 2 years, we have actually subsidized more than 40,000 charging wall boxes on private ground. That's important, and it's cheaper for us. And also we can see that EV sales are boosting, but we have limitation in space. It's a lot of things happening in the city. Also, local grid capacity can be a challenge. And also the fact that 61% live in a multifamily building, in an apartment. And down to the right, we have another challenge. I feel sometimes that my work is extremely fascinating, but of course a little bit busy. So you feel like you're running for the train, making sure that you have enough chargers at any time. Also, we need more focus on freight electric vehicles. So up to the right, you can see Oslo City Hub. There we have like 20 larger trucks and also cargo vans, only based on zero emission fuel. And I think within a couple of years, actually next year, one of the biggest transporter will do all transport with zero emission vehicles inside Ring 3, which is literally 2/3 of the city. So there are some examples. Down to the left is the Prime Minister opening phase 2 of Oslo City Hub a couple of weeks ago. And also we want more electric taxis. A little bit like other cities, we want, in fact, all taxis to be zero emission within 2024. So then you need charging, of course. And here are some examples of mobility houses. It's bomb shelters that is actually converted in the middle of the city to parking and charging for EVs only. Down to the left is the governing mayor and vice mayor. In the middle, you can see driving down under the fortress in the middle of the city is a nice one. And of course, we need new innovative solutions all the time, pop-up chargers to save space, and of course, inductive charging, robot charging, and slim quick chargers. And some other examples, and of course, the taxis. We have started a project with Jaguar Land Rover for wireless charging of taxis. Looking forward to that one. So you can also see this container which you can move around. One day it can charge big trucks, another day it can charge maritime vessels, the third for clean building sites. And of course, everything is connected. I love EVs, but I hate to say this, but the world is more than EVs. We need a holistic view. We need more public transportation, and public transportation is actually king and doing quite well in Oslo. And all public transportation will be zero emission from 2028. So we are lagging a little bit behind Shenzhen and other cities that you will hear more about, but we have this focus. Public transportation, zero emission public transportation, and of course, pedestrians, cyclists, autonomous vehicles, all these have to be insured. And the last slide, you can see here in the future, you need to electrify everything. Also, the big container ships down to the left, it will be autonomous, it will be electric, of course, and it will be a Norwegian product. To the right, you can see up at Svalbard, far beyond the polar circle, it's an autonomous minibus, which is being tested together with the polar bears. So that's a strange encounter, but yeah, nice. So that was it for me. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Yes. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Sturre, for your presentation, and also thank you for keeping the time.
I did.
Say,
fantastic.
You did.
You.
So I can give you your let's say already a point for that.
Good.
Of course.
A small needle or something. Yeah. Thanks.
Sorry for the sound
sorry
problems,
about
but I think it was solved somewhere halfway, and I hope that at least the audience could follow your presentation until the end.
I hope so.
Yeah. So thank you very much. I think it gives an extremely interesting picture of what actually the city of Oslo is achieving across the different transport modes, persons transport, freight transport, and also I'm sure the dimension of the infrastructure you mentioned, maybe the sharing of the infrastructure, the access to the infrastructure will be maybe an interesting point later for the discussion, as we would like to develop a bit, I would say, the latest insight around the intelligent charging and shared infrastructure. So I think you could definitely give plenty of insights of that from the Oslo projects. And actually, I saw in your graph you showed of the leading EV countries that indeed number one being Norway, and so China also number 4, quite high ranked on that ranking. So maybe later on in the panel, when we heard to the contribution from Joma from China, we could also
looking forward to that one.
Look to that as well. Yes, very good. Thank you very much. And yeah, we will keep for the moment I would say the panel closed, but maybe for the audience, please note down your questions on a piece of paper or post it in the chat box. So we will gather the questions all together, and yeah, we will come back to your questions later on. So once again, Sturre Portvik, thank you very much for Oslo. Yeah, my pleasure to introduce you to the second speaker, who is Liz Bennison. Also, a warm welcome, Liz. Liz Bennison is Managing Director for mainland Europe at the Arriva Group. Yeah, we know Arriva all very well. Of course, also UITP. Estimated member of the Public Transport Association. Yeah, Liz Bennison, Managing Director of mainland Europe. So we could conclude this is everything outside the United Kingdom. And if I've done well my homework, this counts up actually to 13 countries in the mainland Europe, where Arriva is operating public transport networks, buses and trains. And maybe last but not least, also wanted to share that Arriva is a very active member in the UITP, and we do have also representation on the bus committee with Matthew Greener, who I hope is also with us somewhere in the virtual space. But we are more than let's say honored that Liz will give us the presentation. And the title of your contribution is Building Back Better and Greener, which sounds very nice. And I also recognize in the title the public transport campaign that UITP had been promoting since the outbreak of the pandemic. But yeah, I leave now the floor and the screen to you, Liz, for your contribution on behalf of Arriva.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, right, sorry, I was getting a message saying I was still on mute. Yes, sorry, so good afternoon, everyone. Thanks very much for this opportunity today. I realise it's at the end of a long conference, so hopefully everyone's got their coffees in, ready for this session. So really just what I want to do, spend the next 15 minutes or so just explaining to you a little bit about how we at Arriva do intend to build back better and greener beyond the COVID crisis. And Arno, you've done your homework very well. We are in 14 countries across mainland Europe. That includes the UK. So your homework was very well done there. Okay, may I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So for those of you who are a bit less familiar with us, Arriva is a pan-European public transport operator. We do operate across 14 countries, right the way down from Serbia, right the way through up to the Netherlands and the UK. Last year, we delivered 2.1 billion passenger journeys across those 14 countries. We're part of the Deutsche Bahn Group. We're headquartered in the UK, but today around about 50% of our revenues come from mainland Europe. And what do? We do bus and train predominantly. We do regional and national train services, and we do urban, regional and long distance buses. Okay, next slide, please. So at Arriva, we're very acutely aware that part of our role as a public transport provider is to tackle climate change. It's an intrinsic part of what we do and not a sort of nice aside. We mobilised our first electric fleet back in 2013, and therefore we've got a pretty in-depth experience by now of procuring electric buses and trains, managing them, operating them. Today, we operate around about 260 ZEV buses across our markets. We're not in all 14 markets yet, but we're starting to get there. And we also do operate electric trains in a number of countries. For Arriva and for Deutsche Bahn, that's been a substantial investment over the last decade. And it's not just in the vehicles, it's also very much in the supporting technology. And that's one of the things that we're keen to stress is that it's not just about the vehicles, it's about the way we schedule, it's about the way we maintain. There's a whole ecosystem of tech there that underpins what we do around electric fleets. We're absolutely committed to becoming a greener and greener operation throughout the life of our strategic plan. And in doing that, we want to work very closely with our customers, the PTAs and the ministries. Okay, next slide, please. So in terms of how we do that, really our ethos is twofold. Firstly, we've got to decarbonise our fleet to the best of our ability. And obviously that's going to take time. It's going to take investment. The technology is changing all the time. So that's going to be a journey that we're on, for the next decade at least. But we also need to use our position as a public transport operator to encourage modal shift. And I'm sorry to say this, but it's away from private car use. So as you're well aware, cars and vans and lorries are collectively responsible for 90% of emissions. And private car usage alone makes up 50% of those emissions, whereas bus is just 3% and rail is even less. A really shocking statistic to me is that cars, on average, are in use for less than 5% of their lives, which means they're parked somewhere taking space the rest of the time. Whereas obviously public transport infrastructure, buses and trains, is in continuous use throughout the day. So I loved the picture of the bus lane with the EVs in from Oslo, because that to me is the problem, is that even an electric car still sits in a traffic jam and still creates congestion. So at the core of what we believe is that mass transit has to be the core of any green transport solution for any city and region. Today, our road space has really been built and centred around the car, but that space could be used so differently. And for example, we're very strong advocates of things like dedicated bus lanes for BRT, which generally will help towards providing more efficient, high-frequency public transport. And again, we see new technology playing a huge role in that. And certainly we've been working with a number of effectively big data companies to start to get much more intelligent about things like really understanding different flows around routes and different flows around traffic. So technology to me is the thing that's going to unlock all of this. We're working with the bus manufacturers to look at their technologies, very keen to work more closely with the bus manufacturers, and particularly things around battery and how we make battery life better. Generally, affordability around electric fleets is something that worries us all the time. And the more that we can collectively do to bring down the price of electric fleets, the better it is for all of us. As I said as well, we're also looking at other technologies which will not just make public transport journeys more reliable, being able to predict traffic flows and so on, but also are going to make them much more convenient for passengers. But also things like passenger count technology, which we see as being able to make the journeys safer and hopefully more pleasant for our passengers as well. Okay, if we move to the next slide, I was just going to drill down on a couple of examples of where we're operating at scale now, electric fleets. So if I talk about the UK to start with, in the UK, we first started using inductive charging in the town of Milton Keynes back in 2013. In London, we were the first company to have an all-electric bus route. London's moving very rapidly towards completely electric now, but we were one of the first there. And also in Liverpool, we've been really experimenting with a mix of electric buses and hybrids as well. In the UK, we have the privilege of working across a number of regions, and therefore we're able to deploy different solutions for different terrains, different types of environment, different economic points as well. And therefore we're really able to learn about their applicability to those different situations. And then we can take that learning, because we're working across multiple regions, facing off to multiple public transport authorities. We're building up a wealth of that knowledge that we can then in turn feed back into the strategies of the government and specific plans within the region. And all of that benefits us in the long term too, because it allows us, if we've got long-term sight of those investment plans, then we can better manage our investment in the fleet. If I then look at a different example and I move to the Netherlands on the next slide. So on the Netherlands, we are the second largest operator today of electric buses. In the north of the Netherlands, we're in the middle of mobilising our new train contract. And under that contract, we will operate what we believe is the world's first zero-emission trains that are capable of running on both electrified and non-electrified lines. So there were some very specific things around that geography that meant it was very difficult to electrify the whole network. And therefore, we worked with the PTA in northern Netherlands to come up with a solution that could cope with that different landscape. In the region of Limburg, which is in the south of the Netherlands, we operate a multimodal contract, bus and train. And on that contract, we're already halfway to achieving zero emissions for the province of Limburg. Having a combined bus and train contract has really allowed us to optimise our timetables and really build services that encourage the greater use of public transport by really making that first mile and last mile more convenient for the individual passenger. And in Limburg, again, back to the theme of technology, we're piloting a mobility as a service, a new solution that Arriva's developed along with a number of partners. And really what we're trying to do through that is connect other mobility solutions into our bus and train spine. But also using it to give our passengers far better information about the options that they have. So not just the routes that are available to them, but also things like the total journey cost, and comparing routes based on total journey cost. And also we're trying to also pick what would be your greenest option. So as an individual passenger, if you're looking to travel in Limburg, we'll be able to give you the different options that you have, but we'll also be able to tell you which one of those causes the least environmental impact. So again, we're using our knowledge, we're building up that knowledge base on how to intelligently decarbonise, whilst really looking at sort of commercial innovation and technology and the use of our transport spine to really encourage that modal shift that we think is absolutely key. Okay, next slide. So what have we learned in the course of all of this? This is, getting on for a decade now that we've been looking at greener transport, and what have we learned from all of that? Well, in countries like the UK and Netherlands, the governments and the regions have really long-term strategies with clear green targets, much like Stuart mentioned around Oslo as well. And for an organisation like Arriva, this is absolutely gold dust, because it really allows us to plan our investments more intelligently and to work long in advance with the rail and bus suppliers when it comes to procuring new vehicles. So I'd say our first lesson really is around, let's please have clear and long-term policy objectives. The second one really relates again to a point that Stuart raised earlier around infrastructure. What we've learned from experience across the countries that we're operating in is one size doesn't really fit all. Even at the level of charging infrastructure, for example, depot charging tends to suit very much routes where we need autonomy and flexibility, whereas opportunity charging is much better if we've got longer fixed routes that need to operate, on a 24/7 basis. Now, we know all of that because we've been operating these fleets now for nearly a decade, but it's really, really important that that sort of thinking goes in right at the start of a project and aligns with the local context, and that we do have this holistic approach towards designing infrastructure that all these different modes can then plug and play with. The next thing really is around, we all know this, but the economics of running a green fleet are very, very different from our old diesel friends. And it's really vital that that's recognised when we're deciding on the length and structure of contracts. So again, please, involve us early in those discussions, because we can make a much more attractive proposition if we build in the knowledge that we have around operating the fleet into thinking around the structure of the commercial contract and the length of the contract. And the last one, which I know is blatantly obvious, but is very, very true, I think, in this experience, is all about getting it right at the planning stage. That's what's absolutely vital and makes the difference between a successful outcome and a less successful outcome. There's a wealth of experience now in the market between the PTAs, between the operators like ourselves, and very much so the bus manufacturers and the train manufacturers. And really, to me, I'd like to see much more working together from the outset so that we can really design contracts in a way and networks in a way that really encourage innovation in the fleet and really start to reduce that convenience deficit for the passengers. So, what makes them choose public transport over jumping in that private car? So just onto the next slide. Just a brief reflection really on COVID and have our views changed since COVID. COVID has had a pretty devastating effect on public transport as a sector, certainly in the short term. Watching this happen across 14 countries has been both devastating and fascinating at the same time, and seeing the different ways in which the different governments and PTAs and operators responded to the crisis. We've all seen passenger numbers plummet, and really, unfortunately, we've really seen confidence in travelling by bus and train remaining very, very low, despite quite a lot of a building body of evidence now that shows transmission on public transport is actually very low. Our focus for the last 6 months has quite rightly been on making sure that our staff are safe and our passengers are safe, whilst really sort of stabilising our businesses. And we've been hugely grateful to the support that we've received nationally and locally throughout Europe, and also to bodies like UITP and generally to the industry bodies in all of the countries. Together, I think we've got through this, and I think we've all got a lot closer through that as well. But has it changed our green agenda? Absolutely not. And if anything, I think we're starting to see now an increasing urgency to build back better and greener. We all know that pollution has really dropped in major towns and cities, particularly during the period of lockdown. And many cities have decided to give over more space, initially temporarily, to walking and cycling. Here in the UK, there was a YouGov study which found that 64% of participants did not want to go back to pre-COVID levels of pollution because they'd experienced that good clean air. And so to us, this demonstrates that our citizens, our potential passengers, are wanting to lock in those environmental gains through the crisis. And mass public transport, to me, remains the most sustainable way for transporting large numbers of people between and within those urban areas. So to sum up on my final slide, I think really, if I could make 3 pleas, I guess it says here to government, but I think it's really to the sector as a whole, to the bus and train manufacturers as well, but also to those technology companies out there as well, because I think these are the 3 things that to us can start to make this move at pace. So the first thing is that we all need to focus on that modal shift. only by reducing that convenience deficit between the private car and a public transport journey will we really sort of create the momentum for change. And what do I mean by the convenience deficit? I mean, today I could walk out of my house, jump in my car and drive to where I need to be, and that would be very, very straightforward. At the moment, living in a semi-rural area in the south of England, my alternatives through public transport are actually quite convoluted and quite complex. So how do we make that better? How do we make the information better? How do we make it a far easier option for me to leave the car at home? The second one is really around the financing of all of this, and really how can the broader ecosystem really help us to decarbonise. So at an EU level, we're really keen that member states start to think about how they're going to use the COVID-19 recovery fund to build back better and greener. And here in the UK, the government's decarbonisation of transport plan should really be setting those long-term objectives for both bus and for rail. And finally, work with us really to plan and build those infrastructures that support this green journey. And that's both from the physical side, the charging infrastructures, etc., the way that the roads get laid out in the future, but also on the digital side as well. You know, work with us to join up the data that we've all started to amass now to be able to provide some real insight, both for operators like ourselves, but also for passengers. And I think if we do all of this and we do it together as an industry, I think that we will build back better and greener. Thank you, and back to you, Arno.
Thank you, Liz, for your presentation and for your, I would say, very broad insight in the experience from the Arriva perspective, even I would say from mainland Europe, but also with information from the UK. So thank you very much, and I think we all take the recommendations that you showed in the end to the governments. Well, let's take what you said broader to the sector. Even maybe I'm quite sure that amongst the attendees in this webinar, we will also see manufacturers and tech companies and city authorities. And it's of course also something to which the UITP fully subscribes in terms of support in key messages that we send out and promote towards the sector. Thank you very much, and I'm quite sure we will come back to quite some points of your presentation in the roundtable as well. I can just share for the moment that we do monitor in UITP the COVID situation on a regular basis in the COVID task force of UITP. Which means that we basically monitor what is the evolution of the demand levels of the networks across Europe, across the world even. And of course, this is quite contrasted picture depending on which city and which country. But we do see a tremendous drop in demand, and we know that also the fare box revenues is suffering from that. And maybe we have there also material for discussion in the roundtable in terms of, say, operations budgets and the new operation budgets forecasts for next year versus the investment or initial investment, let's say, potentials for a fleet renewal, and to see how that looks across the different places. So thank you very much, Lies, for your contribution. And before I introduce to you our third panelists, I just wanted to remind the audience being locked in of the interactive features of the webinar. So first of all, there is the chat box. So don't hesitate to type your question in the chat box, and Luke will collect those questions and distribute them later. Also, there is a poll running, a question poll on the event platform. So you should be able to see somewhere a button or an indicator for the poll. And please do participate in the poll, because it will contribute later on to the interaction with you, dear audience. Okay, let's move on, because we have still a presentation to run from this time Jo Ma, which my pleasure now to introduce you to the audience. Jo Ma is the Deputy General Manager of, and the Financial Controller of the Shenzhen Bus Group Corporation based in Shenzhen, China. Welcome, Jo, and it's real pleasure to introduce you from Shenzhen, beautiful city of Shenzhen, I should say, which we had the opportunity ourselves in UITP to visit. I think it was 2 years ago with the bus committee of UITP when you hosted us in your company. Joe Ma was also very well known in UITP, on the board of UITP as chair of the taxi and the rail height committee, actually. So very much on-demand transport activity. So that's also very nice, and it's, I think, an extreme pleasure to be able to listen to the update of the situation of the bus fleet, electric bus fleet in Shenzhen. I remember that Joe, you made a presentation in the UITP bus conference in Busworld 2017. So that was already 3 years ago, and at that occasion, you had the primeur to announce that your network, your entire fleet, has been electrified. So it's interesting to see today, 2020, that we are 3 years later, to listen to your, I would say, incremental experiences since, maybe also to some of the optimization feedback from the company, you have entitled your presentation "Supporting the Electric Fleet, Batteries, Infrastructure, and More." So I would say, please, Joe Ma, take the screen and the floor.
Thank you, Arno. It's a real pleasure to be here tonight. Well, here for me is tonight. So just want to go through this very quickly, because I'm aware of the timing and all that. For those of you who are not aware of, not been to Shenzhen, Arno's been quite a few times. Shenzhen is a relatively new city. We're sort of like 40 years old this year, and started off 40 years ago as a very, very small fishing village in the southern part of China, right next to Hong Kong. Nowadays, we have from 30,000 population 40 years ago. We have a population of 22 million. So we've seen tremendous growth in the last 4 decades. And with that, we with Shenzhen being a new city, a relatively new city, we don't carry any baggages in terms of trying out new technologies and new ideas. So as Arno said, in 2017, we became the first city in the world to become fully electric with our bus fleet. And 2018, we also became the first city in the world, I believe, to have gone completely 100% electric with our taxi fleet. Just to give some, give everybody a bit of numbers. In terms of buses, we have 22,000 buses in the city, and all of those are electric, as I said. And 17,000 buses and 22,000 taxis, and all of those are electric. So we in that sense, we're a bit of a lapmeister for electrification. So next slide, please. Okay. Next one. Okay. So we started with our whole electrification process in 2010. Over a decade ago. I mean, needless to say that the technologies has improved a lot. So we started with the world's first fully electric taxi company. This was a joint venture with BYD. So we started with 50 taxis, and we also introduced 137 electric buses back in 2010. And the first charging station, of course, to support the fleet. And by 2017, ourselves, within our company, we became fully electric with our bus fleet. To date, we have just over 6,000 electric buses. As I said before, the whole city in Shenzhen has 17,000 buses, and we are the largest operator with 6,000 buses. And we also have 22,000 taxis electric taxis in the city, of which we have about 5,000. Next slide, please. Okay, bus fleet 5,900, taxi fleet 5,800. We also have other types of vehicles. We have shuttle buses between Hong Kong and Shenzhen. We also have long distance buses. Those are, of course, diesel buses. And the reason for that is because of the range. You know, we really, you know, however much we love to have electric fleet for our intercity buses and buses between Hong Kong and Shenzhen, we're not able to do that right now because of the charging infrastructure. Next slide, please. Okay, just to give everybody some idea of we mainly have two types of two manufacturers, both of which are based in Shenzhen. We have BYD, so we have just about just over 4,000 something BYD buses. We have over 1,000 Nanjing Golden Dragon buses also, and all our taxis, all 5,800 of those are BYD taxis, the E6 model. And we're actually in the process of moving into the next generation of electric taxis, which will be introduced by the end of this year. Next slide, please. Okay. What's the difference between electric and I don't need to really go through this, because the main differences will be, you know, compared to diesel, we're a lot cheaper. I think we're about 50% cheaper in terms of operation costs. In terms of the mileage, of course, we're restricted for our buses. The maximum kind of range that we operate is about 220 kilometers per day. So some of them will have to, you know, throughout the day, they have to go back to the depot for top up. In terms of operation costs, it's a lot cheaper. Next slide, please. Okay, some of the main benefits we've found within, you know, like by deploying electric fleet is that we've seen a tremendous drop in terms of noise in the city. You know, like for most of you for those of you who understand the electric buses, in terms of like the drop in the noise level is quite tremendous, particularly when it's within the city, running in the city around 20 kilometers per hour. We are actually recording minus 12 dBA of noise reduction, which is quite significant. In terms of other types of benefit to the city, you know, the pollution, the emission for each of our bus, for our 6,000 vehicles, the buses, we're seeing a reduction of 400 tons of CO2 emission per year, and 320 tons of NO2 emission, and SO2 emission. We're seeing something like almost 1,700 tons of SO2 emission per year. And we also see tremendous reduction in terms of other particle matters. If you look at the sort of like the economy, the sort of like the economic benefit of running a diesel and electric bus, for our electric bus, we're saving almost 90,000 RMB per year. For those of you, 90,000 is about what, 9,000 euro. I think that's the equivalent of 9,000 euro. So for each of our bus, we have 6,000 buses. So you can imagine multiplying that for, you know, 9,000 euro by 6,000 buses, which is quite a significant number of, you know, amount of money. Next slide, please. Okay, yeah, some of the sort of like people always ask us what are the good practices and what are the lessons learned from us. The good practice that we would recommend is establishing the charging operation maintenance standards, which is very important, because you need to we have the same kind of charging standards for all our buses. We have different models, which makes it easier for the buses to go to different depots for the charging. Maintaining the clear communication between the OEM and the service providers. The benefit that we have with the two OEMs being based in Shenzhen is we're able to sort of like talk to them and get support from them all the time. We're also sending all our staff to the OEMs for training for the new bus models. And also in case of, particularly in the early days, if there was a breakdown, they're able to come and help us out straight away. The other thing that we need to do is, which a good practice, we did the communication and engagement with the community, which is very important, because naturally there's kind of, initially they're a bit kind of apprehensive about it. There's the whole kind of like the electric buses being next to the neighborhoods. So engagement, early stage engagement is very important. And the other thing is the staff training, even within the company, because again, because using a new kind of technology, they're always a bit apprehensive in the first place, but through kind of communication and lots of training for them, it's kind of helps to ease the kind of anxiety. And some of the lessons learned, like vehicle and battery is best purchased from the OEM directly. We did initially purchase the batteries and the vehicles separately, and we have separate types of operation model, including even for the charging service providers. So it's important that the lessons that we've learned is to buy the battery as well as the bus from the same OEM rather than separately. The vehicle specific charging regime, what we do is for each of our bus and each of our route, we have a specific charging regime, because some of the buses are running longer routes. Maybe they're sort of running maximum range of 220 kilometers per day. So they don't need to come back at lunchtime for a quick top up. But for some of the buses running beyond the 220 kilometer range per day, they will have to come back in the afternoon or lunchtime or whatever to come back for a quick top up. So it's important that we worked out where which bus goes where in terms of finding the charging stations and charging facilities. The technicians is important. In the early stages of our electrification, the OEM technicians are embedded into all our depots, so they're on hand to help with any kind of like technical issues. And one thing we also say that with the lessons that we've learned is avoid swapping of batteries, which don't happen nowadays, I'm sure. In the early days, we had sort of like we tried the ideas of swapping batteries just to save this sort of like the charging time. But we found that was a lot of problem. First of all, the battery packs are very, very heavy, and the constantly swapping of batteries will actually lead to kind of a lot of technical issues. Next slide, please. Okay, just some of our vehicles. Most of our vehicles now are BYD the K8 model, 10.8 meters. And these are all DC chargings. We do depot charging mostly overnight. So we find that in Shenzhen particularly, the nighttime electricity price is one fifth of the daytime price. So we do all our charging. We try and do all our charging at nighttime. Okay, next slide. And the next model that we're deploying now is the K7. We also have a lot of 8.5 and 6 meter buses. The reason why we're deploying smaller buses now is because in Shenzhen, 10 years ago, there was only one metro line. Nowadays, there's about 12 metro lines. So we're seeing the metro is actually now forming the backbone for public transport in Shenzhen. And that has taken a lot of passenger shares of our buses. So what we're trying to do now is to run shorter range services, particularly sort of like the spook and wheel type of services, feeding into major transport interchanges. And so the buses we're buying now have smaller battery capacity, and they're able to sort of like run more efficiently because they're running kind of like shorter ranges. Okay, next. Okay, about charging station. Charging station is very important. We're very lucky to be to have a lot of charging facilities in the Shenzhen. As of now, we have about 880 depots dotted all around the city of Shenzhen. So you need to really bear in mind about the where your bus routes are and where your charging facilities are. So it's important to plan all that ahead in terms of when you're deploying the sort of like the bus services. Next slide, please. Okay, so with 180 depots, but we have 104 charging stations. So right now we have about 1,700 chargers for all our buses, 1,000 charging terminals and 3,000 chargers. The reason why we have the differences in number, the charger for some of our chargers, we would have four cables. So at nighttime we can charge 4 buses at the same time. from one charger, and we can regulate the charging time for each cable. So for some of the buses which need to be dispatched early in the morning, we would charge them up fully within 2 hours. For those buses we don't need to dispatch early, to much later on, we can use a sort of 8-hour charging time to charge up the bus. So that's why this is the dynamic charging regime that we've invented ourselves. For our taxis, right now we have about 16 charging stations. Again, they're all dotted around the city. With taxis, it's a bit different because taxis tend to be running, with no fixed routes. So we need to really find suitable location for the taxis and convenient location for the taxis. The way we allow our taxi drivers to go and get, to charge up the vehicles would be, they all carry an app in their handphone, and then they can by using the app, they will find the nearest available charger, so they can they can book it and then go and charge up the taxis. Next. Okay, so this is just an example of our comprehensive charging station for our taxis, which is like a one-stop charging station for our taxis fleet. So this is more than just a charging station. We actually provide a lot of convenience services and supporting facilities for our taxi drivers, and they can go in and order the lunch. They can have a rest, and they can also get the sort of like the vehicle maintenance parts and things like that. So as I mentioned earlier in our last slide, that we're using a lot of technologies, applications, so taxi drivers can book a charging space and can book a charging a time for charging the vehicles. They can also book their lunch beforehand. So while they're there waiting for the taxis to be charged up, they can also have a rest within some of these charging stations. Next slides. Okay, this is some of the charges that we have. Most of our charges are 150 kilowatt, but we also have some that are 240 kilowatts. And as you can see on the pictures here, we have 4 cables on some of the chargers. So the buses we can park 4 buses right next to the chargers, and they can be charged at the same time at different ratios. Next slide. Okay, we also have this, what we call the centralized dynamic charging. This is a new technology that we've invented. Again, this is like a mega battery pack, and it can discharge batteries, discharge electricity to all the different chargers. Next. Okay, so the type of charging, the charging that we have opportunity overnight charging for mostly for the buses. We have opportunity charging for the taxis. We have midday top-up charging for some of the buses that are running, as I said, running more longer than 220 kilometers per day. Next slide. Okay. People keep asking us what's our next step. We're actually now trying out hydrogen fuel cell buses. Of course, right now they're still a lot more expensive. If you look at the cost of an electric bus, for us, the electric bus is about 125,000 USD, whereas the hydrogen fuel bus is about 700 USD. But we are looking, actively looking into sort of like new technologies, and we're now trying out a few hydrogen buses. And of course, the charging time is a lot quicker. Like for a typical electric bus, it would take between 2 and 2.5 hours to charge up, to have a fully top charge up. And whereas for hydrogen fuel cell, it only takes about 10 minutes. Some of the other technical kind of aspects, as you can see here, the battery lifespan for the electric bus is about 4 years, whereas for the hydrogen fuel cell, it's about 1 year. Battery capacity is pretty much the same. So some of the yes, as I said, we're already trying out some of the hydrogen buses, and there is another fellow operator in Shenzhen, within the Guangdong province. They're already up and running with some of the hydrogen buses already. So Next slide, please. I think that's it, Arno. So happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. All of a sudden it was done. We were with so much patience and focus listening to your story that it was a surprise that it was finished. But thank you very much, Joe, for I would say for this impressive insight in the Shenzhen Bus group. It's true that only by the size of the numbers it is already impressive to I would say to grasp, because I got just some figures from the UITP statistics updated until the 1st of January this year, that we are in the entire European Union now with 2,700 electric buses. Of course, so this is not even less the half than your fleet. And of course, this maybe shows also the difference in scale. And indeed, what was also maybe interesting that I don't know if all the attendants are aware of the situation in Shenzhen, but yeah, you are only one of the 3 operators. So you are operating 6,000 buses, but I understood altogether in the municipality of Shenzhen there are 16,000 buses, right?
Yeah, almost. We're now reaching almost 17,000.
Yeah, so that is absolutely tremendous in terms of numbers, of course, and I'm quite sure we can only see the future, I would say, for us here in Europe, where you are today now. Also maybe to come back on the COVID pandemic, I think you have been unlocking the society and the economy also a little bit earlier than other places around the globe. And according to our statistics, you are currently around 80% back at the bus network, right, on the ridership.
Yeah, on average, we're about 80%. So in the morning peak, we're back to about 95% compared to last year. And in sort of like the off-peak time, this is about 60-70%. Yeah.
Okay,
but
so I guess this is
all our passengers are asked to, they're required to wear a face mask. Within all with all our taxis and all the buses, and in fact with all the public transport facilities in Shenzhen, everybody has to wear a face mask.
Yes. Good to know. And maybe of course we will not entirely focus the Q&A session on the let's say the situation today of the networks in terms of COVID measures and impact, but try to let's say to structure the Q&A around the technology for their decarbonization, as we were supposed to, let's say, to have the theme on this topic. And I would say before opening the floor, just to stay with you on the panel still, because I think we got as a short resume, let's say as an introductory presentation from you, Sturre. You presented on behalf of the city of Oslo and its environmental agency. I would say the policy learnings for electric vehicles deployment in Oslo and Norway. So this gave us a quite broad picture in terms of technologies, but also of transport carriers, be it passenger transport or freight and taxis. Then we got the presentation from Lise Benissan on behalf of Arriva, sharing, let's say, mainland and UK experiences from different countries and contracts that you're running with trains and buses, and where you especially also underlined the importance of the policy linked to the technology, and to get also, in fact, space to run buses, and also dedicated policy and infrastructure for the buses in order to make I would say the benefit of green buses being effective in reality. And then we got just your presentation, Joe, from let's say the Shenzhen Bus Group on the electrification. We have that fresh in mind with all the let's say hub and spoke systems that you invented in Shenzhen, and the top-up charging after the lunch. I remember we saw that also with the bus committee when we had the lunch, that the buses came back and we could see them filling up. Yeah, so maybe my first question to the panel would be: do you have any questions? Let's say amongst you. So maybe Lise to Joe and Stuart, or Stuart to Joe and Lise, or Joe. Any questions for the panel first?
Yeah.
If there's anyone who would like to.
Yeah, I have a question.
To raise the hand. Yeah, I saw a virtual hand. No, sorry, a real hand.
Real
Stuart,
hand,
please.
I hope. Still mine. Yeah. It was impressive presentation, Joma. I mean, we can only dream of all buses being electric. And even if all buses in Norway were electric, we still have a way to go. There are too few buses. We have like 1,800 buses in Oslo, but of course, we're here to learn. So yeah, really interesting. Thanks. It's more a comment, but anyway, yeah.
Well, we're a small country. We're like the population of 22 million. So
yeah. It's hard to compare. But it's inspiring.
Very inspiring, and likewise. So very inspiring, and likewise, it's the scale, Joe, that just blows me away. We had some representatives from BYD visitors in Croatia, and we operate 1,400 buses in Croatia. Yeah. And we sort of said to them, would it be a problem? If we said to you replace the entire fleet, would it be a problem? And I think BYD said that was one morning's worth of production for them to replace the entire fleet, and the scale is just absolutely mind blowing. But I do think we should be learning more from you. I found it really interesting listening to you, because I think you are ahead of all of us on this journey, and I think there's lots of lessons we should be learning from you. So yeah, great presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. As I said, I think with Shenzhen being quite a young city, we don't carry the baggages of we just, it's easier to plan all the depot facilities. I think. Buying the buses is easy, but the infrastructure is actually the difficult bit. I'm sure you know that. So we're quite lucky in that sense, because we're not within the city center, but within the sort of outskirts of the cities. We have a lot of space for us to build the infrastructure. Yeah. So and that is actually a very important point. Because the buses are running sort of like the ranges. By the time they reach the suburbs, there's kind of space for us to build the infrastructure. Yeah, but it's now, I mean, getting more and more difficult, because with the, as I said, the metro system is actually creating taking a lot of passenger shares away. Yeah.
Interesting. Interesting. You have the same problems that we have as well. We had the same problem in Copenhagen when they extended the metro, and it's difficult to predict what it's going to do to passenger numbers. Stuart, I was interested in, where do you see the balance point then between private EV cars and public transport?
Yeah, I think I'm in trouble the day public transportation is going down. And luckily, it's historically high. I mean, that was pre-COVID-19, of course. We struggle with the same challenges, but I think it's very, the use of private cars has actually dropped with 20%, but it's a fine balance, to be honest, because we don't want people to use their private car into the city center. We don't want that. So we have at the same time to promote public transportation, but also mobility as a service, car sharing, and all that stuff. Micro mobility, everything. Yeah. So it's a fine balance.
Maybe, please, yes, please, Liz.
I was just, what would you like the operators to do better then to help you with that balance? What's missing in our menu?
Well, I think we're getting there. It takes some time, and of course it depends a little bit on who you are asking, because there are different opinions, of course. But the thing is that At the moment, it's possible because what you do is to increase prices passing in the toll gates in and out of the city. Parking is becoming more and more expensive. Okay, it's a little cheaper with zero emission, of course, and that's important, but we don't want people to take their private cars. So we also removed a lot of parking, and some of them are zero emission craft and service vehicles and taxis. So we had to take this step by step. It's not a revolution. It's more like taking a gradual step in the right direction, more shared mobility.
Yeah.
And taking the streets back, to the citizens. Yeah.
One of the things I like to sort of like comment on is, in terms of, what Liz just mentioned about whether we can take away the private vehicles off the street, which is something actually we're struggling with in not just in Shenzhen but in the whole of China, because there is a rising middle class, and the first thing that people like to do is to buy a private car, whether they drive it or not. So the city is actually trying to restrict. I mean, at least we're trying to restrict the sort of purchasing of diesel or petrol vehicles. So in Shenzhen, what we do is we if you want to buy a traditional vehicle, like a traditional fuel vehicle, there is a long waiting list, and it's actually more than just a waiting list. It's like a lottery system. You have to enter a lottery, and then you wait to see whether you get a license or not. But with EV, private EV vehicles, you can get a license straight away, and it's the license is free actually. So people actually, the government is in Shenzhen is encouraging people to buy. They know people are going to buy private cars, but the government is actually trying to encourage people to buy EV, electric vehicles. So which is a good thing. But as I said, Shenzhen, China there's a rising middle class. People just aspire to be car owners. Yeah.
Very good. Maybe I'm also looking to the clock. With the time is ticking, and we did get some questions from the audience. I just got here a virtual hand sign from Luke, telling me that there are some questions in the chat box, and I would just pick out one of them. So there is one first question actually from the audience. I think it will be a question addressed to you, Lies, from Arriva. It is in relation to the sector support. I think it was probably when you showed the 3 recommendations in the end. So the question here reads like follows: so how do you think that the governments or the European Union can further support the decarbonization of the public transport sector?
So I think what's fascinating is working across a number of countries. We see a whole range of different approaches from both PTAs and from the central ministries as well. And I would say the single biggest thing that would help us across all of those governments is just to talk earlier. So talk to the industry earlier before you're already head down in a project and bringing us in at that point in time. So the earlier we can get involved, the more we can bring our expertise, the more we can plan. We can plan to be a part of it. We can shape the way that things either come to market or things get, infrastructure gets built. So that would be my single biggest ask, is just involve us right at the very start. And I think then, if I had one extra one to add, we've seen over the course of the crisis, we've seen change happen literally overnight. Things that we thought were really difficult in the past, and they literally changed overnight. So going cashless in some of our countries, we've been on conversations about going cashless on buses for a very long time. And because of the crisis, and because it was seen as part of the safety agenda, we went cashless overnight. So let's just remember that we can change very, very quickly when we need to, and let's try and keep that agility as we move forward. That'd be my 2.
Yeah, Oh, very good. Thank you for this answer. And another question, I think it's more technical or an information question also for you, Liz, was if there you presented in one of the slides the zero emission trains, I think in the Netherlands.
Yeah.
So the question was more if there's some more information to find in the internet or in a specific source about this information.
It'll definitely be on our Dutch website, but I'll make a note of it and I'll post something. I'll tweet something or whatever about it. It's a story we're very proud of, so I'm happy to do that.
Okay, thank you, Liz, for that. And I will also communicate that to Luke so that this information can be, let's say, shared in the appropriate channel that people can find it back. Thank you very much. Yeah, there were also actually a question here for Sture for Oslo. This is one of the participants at the following question: if Oslo did consider the increased global environmental impact of producing the zero emission cars. Here precise. So the asker of this question is thinking of the mining for cobalt, increase in the CO2 emission during the production phase, or did you only consider the local emission levels?
Well, I hope we do both, to put it like that, because of course it's extremely important to know the whole production line, also to have focus on using renewable when you are producing cars, and of course use the interior could be renewable. It's important that all these small steps are under consideration. And of course, life cycles perspective is always a good thing. And also try to find out what do you do with the battery after the car is dead. You could use it probably for 10 more years to build up racks balancing the grid and use it for 10 more years. And that's extremely important that you look at the whole life cycles thing. And I'm convinced because, I mean, 97, at the moment, 98% of all the energy produced is actually hydropower, and it's clean, 100% zero emission. So I think the account is pretty good compared to diesel and gasoline, to put it like that. So after a smaller EV, you would need like maybe 6 months to actually level out the increased production emissions connected to the production of the battery. But after that, for let's say 10 more years, you are driving zero emission. So, but you have to honestly to look at that. And also mining, it's a major issue. You should be in contact with the OEMs, the producers, and try to do things better always. So yeah, of course, it's important.
And is this something that is also, let's say, materialized in your procurement departments? Because I could imagine that the city of Oslo, when it is about public procurements, that you could, let's say, control the evaluation criteria on this specific environmental aspect. But how do you deal with that? I don't know. You talked about also ships or boats, harbor equipment. I guess these are private party that are procuring. Is there a mechanism, or how do you manage these let's say criteria for environmental procurement in that case?
Yeah, if we, for instance, buy a huge quantity of quick chargers, DC chargers, let's say, we are trying, of course, to approach the producer. Let's say it's an Italian producer or one from Portugal, and we are asking them for all types of information, and we are trying to go down the production line. I'm not saying that this is easy, by no means, but we are trying to do that, and it's always a kind of mandatory in the public procurement that you have a sound and good analysis of the life cycles impact the product you purchase had. Yeah.
Thank you, Stur. Maybe
Yeah.
maybe this question I could also ask to Joe Ma how this is looking in Shenzhen. We heard yesterday, by the way, on the television the speech of the president of China on the carbon neutrality of the Chinese Republic. I think there was a mistake in the French, at least the French presenter spoke about 2020. So I said, okay, they are already looking at how things are in Shenzhen, but I understood this is for 2060. Where China will be carbon neutral, but back to today is, let's say, the environmental impact as a criteria also let's say an issue let's say in Shenzhen, and how is that dealt with?
Well, a couple of points that I actually should touch on just now about zero emission. We're not zero emission yet, because although the buses within the city are zero emission, but the generation of electricity for Shenzhen is we're still relying about 40% on traditional kind of coal-fired station, and although we're 60% using either nuclear or hydroelectric generation, so we're not quite zero emission from source yet. In terms of this the actual kind of the second point that Stuart mentioned about what was that on the batteries? I think that's an interesting point. We've already seen one generation of electric buses and electric taxis. We just phased out some buses just recently. The first batch of buses we bought 10 years ago. The batteries are being taken back by the OEM for either stripping down for kind of regeneration, or the buses that some of the batteries are actually being used for domestic purposes, for storage of facilities, storage of electricity, and the dynamic charging station I mentioned just now in my presentation. We're actually using some of the old batteries and install them into our the dynamic stations. And what we do is we use them to store nighttime electricity, which is 1/5 of the price of the daytime. And we release the electricity during the daytime. So new technologies are being tested for all batteries in terms of we're using them and also prolonging the lifespan. So some of the things that we're doing right now in Shenzhen. But I mean, as I said, I think the aim is to achieve really 100% zero emission, and I think that for us would still take some time. Hopefully with the improvement of technologies that we can get to that point at some stage.
Thank you. Liz, did you want to add something to that? I saw your hand.
No. Sorry, no,
okay.
I'm just having problems with my tech.
Okay, sorry, it's the tech. Okay, sorry. Now then, thank you, Joe, for your answer. And I think we should leave it with this, unfortunately, because there were some more questions also on the hydrogen technology, the forecasts of hydrogen, but I'm afraid that we are running out of time, and the webcam streaming time is limited. So I must close here the Q&A session by thanking the panelists for today, by let's say on behalf of the Intelligent Transport Summit to have participated in this session. Thank you very much. It was a personal pleasure also to share the afternoon for me here with you all, and also thank you for the let's say invisible but present virtual audience to be with us this hour, and for all the questions raised. Thanks a lot. I think, of course, there's much more to say, but in a nutshell, the technology for decarbonization, I think what's maybe interesting to take away is that for sure at the different implementation rates and let's say implementation experiences, we share, we hear the state of play at the different cities and places in the world through this webinar, which is already very, very positive thing. I also think that probably we live now in a time where the transport as such is getting back to also to the political agenda in many countries because of the pandemic. Sometimes because of the increasing car traffic, but I mean, we are part of the discussion public transportation, so we are definitely happy with this attention, because I think it's really a building back message that this is also the momentum to let's say to position public transportation and urban mobility as a solution for the cities, and to get it back stronger. And yeah, I also hear across the different discussions that the entire with the CO2 carbon thinking, if it is in terms of procurement, but also in terms of second life of products, of batteries, is getting more and more, I would say, common thinking in our domain, in our sector. So I think this is something we will also learn to live with in the contracts and in experience sharing, to make it more circular, and to really get the urban public transportation and sustainable solution on the forefront of our politicians and governments. So thank you very much for all of your contributions. And before closing, I would like to hand over to you, Luke, because I know it is your final session of the week. You have been running since Monday numerous virtual sessions, so you must be exhausted, although we cannot see that. But yeah, maybe Luke, I give the final words to you.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed, Arno, and absolutely in no way exhausted. It's been such a great week that, you know, we've just been so focused on getting this content out, and it's been so valuable for everybody. So thank you to you for moderating this session, and thanks obviously to Liz and Sture and Joe for your time and insight during this session as well. And indeed to all of our speakers, moderators and sponsors for all of your contributions this week as we draw this final live session of the summit to an unfortunate close. Thanks also, as Arno mentioned, to our audience members who have helped to make this such an engaging and an interactive week of discussion and debate. I sincerely hope it isn't too long before we can welcome you all back to a live event. Especially, I think, seeing the appetite for discussion that's attracted over 980 registrants to this week's summit. It's amazing to see. It really is. So thank you. It's really been an incredible week, like I said, and it's just so difficult to pick highlights when every session has been packed out with such a fantastically high caliber of presentations and discussions. As so many of our guests this week have noted, there's no real replacement for live events and networking, but as strange as it is not to hear the applause at the end of every session, this week, I think, has hopefully shown us all that as we begin to settle into this new normal, the value of information sharing between colleagues in this kind of forum has been in no way diminished, and it's great to see. So a final reminder to our audience that if you have missed anything this week that might have piqued your interest, you can still go back and watch on demand for up to 12 months entirely at your leisure. And obviously it's not too late to still head over to the exhibitor booths and get any questions answered by our sponsors either. I think above all this week, we've really seen the passion and commitment that the rail and public transport sectors have to innovate for a better future. And even in these challenging and disruption-filled times, it's just fantastic to see the kind of progress that is being made in these sectors. But yeah, all that's left now to do is to thank everybody just one more time for their involvement throughout this week, and to say on behalf of Intelligent Transport and Global Railway Review, please do take care, stay safe, and we will see you next time. Thank you very much.